My name's Brandon. I'm 32, and last summer I took a house-sitting job way out in the woods of Tennessee. It wasn't supposed to be anything weird. I was just broke, recently laid off, and a friend of mine hooked me up with his cousin who needed someone to watch their family property for a few weeks while they were overseas. The pay was good. Too good, honestly, considering all I had to do was feed 2 dogs, water some plants, and make sure the place didn't burn down. I drove in on a Tuesday afternoon, expecting some rustic old cabin, but what I found was a massive house tucked behind a gravel road with no signs, no neighbors, and barely any signal. It looked old but well kept, like someone had put a lot of money into keeping it alive, even if no one really lived there full time. I didn't ask many questions. I was grateful. But within 3 days, I started noticing things I still can't explain. The first odd thing I noticed was the mirrors. There were a lot of them, more than I'd ever seen in one house. Every hallway had at least 2 facing each other, and almost every room had one hung directly across from the door. At first I figured the owners were just into interior design or something, but they weren't the usual decorative kind. These mirrors were plain, silver-framed, and large, like the kind you'd see in a department store fitting room. On the 3rd night, I was brushing my teeth and thought I saw something move behind me in the bathroom mirror. Not like a shadow or trick of the light, something person-shaped, right at the edge of the frame. I spun around, heart kicking, but the room was empty. I chalked it up to being jumpy and overtired. The dogs hadn't barked, and the house was quiet. Still, I avoided looking at the mirror directly after that. I couldn't explain it, but it gave me this crawling, watched feeling I couldn't shake. A week in, I stopped sleeping through the night. It wasn't just the mirrors anymore. There were sounds, light footsteps above me even though the attic had no floorboards, just beams and insulation. I'd be lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I'd hear them. Slow, deliberate, like someone pacing. I checked the attic twice with a flashlight and my old baseball bat, nothing but dust and cobwebs. The second time, one of the dogs wouldn't come with me. He just sat at the foot of the ladder, growling low in his throat. I tried to laugh it off, tell myself animals get weird about small spaces. But that night, while I was trying to fall asleep again, I heard breathing. Not mine. It was faint, but there, coming from inside the bedroom. I didn't move for hours, just lay there listening, hand clenched around the bat, waiting for something to show itself in the dark. But it never did, just silence, until 1:17 a.m., when the breathing stopped. By the 10th night, I had a routine. I locked every window, drew every curtain, checked the attic hatch twice, then sat on the couch with the dogs and waited. I couldn't sleep, not with the sounds getting louder. The footsteps had moved to the hallway now, slow creaks on the floor like someone carefully pacing back and forth. One night, I heard the back door unlock. Not open, just unlock. The deadbolt slid with that unmistakable metallic clunk, and I sat there frozen, staring at the handle, waiting for it to turn. It didn't. When I checked it in the morning, it was locked again. I thought I was losing it. I changed the locks the next day, even put up an old trail cam facing the door. That night, the door stayed quiet, but the footsteps came again, and this time they were paired with a whisper. Just one word, said low and deliberate like a secret through the vent above my bed, "Come." I left every light in the house on after that. Every single one. I even slept with my shoes on. I tried to show someone the footage from the trail cam, hoping it would back me up. But when I popped the SD card into my laptop, all I saw was static and one frame of a hand pressed flat against the lens. Just a pale, bony hand with long fingers, like it had been waiting right outside the door. I stared at that image for an hour, zooming in, looking for anything. Rings, scars, dirt, but it was just smooth skin and an unnatural stillness. I emailed it to myself, but the file never showed up. That same night, the lights in the house began flickering at 1:17 a.m. sharp, every bulb like it was timed. Then came 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, heavy, on the living room wall. Not the door, the wall. I screamed, but nothing answered. The dogs didn't bark, they just whined and backed into the corner. I sat with my back against the fridge till sunrise. When the power finally stabilized, the digital clock on the oven just flashed 1:17. I called my sister, told her everything. trail, the cam, the knocks. She thought I was having some kind of breakdown, told me to get some sleep and stay off the forums. That stung, but I couldn't blame her. Hell, I wouldn't believe me either. Still, I needed to know what I was dealing with, so I went back to the trail the next day. This time, I brought a friend, Mark, skeptical but curious. We hiked past the spot where I first saw the shadow, and nothing felt off. No pressure, no silence, just forest sounds and dry leaves. But when we reached the base of the ridge, Mark stopped cold. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I didn't. He pointed at the trees, said there was a voice, faint and high, saying his name over and over. I strained to hear, but it was just wind to me. Then Mark started walking toward the woods without a word. I had to grab his arm to stop him. His eyes were glazed over, like sleepwalking. He didn't remember any of it later. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Mark said. The voice calling his name, faint and eerie, like the woods themselves were alive, watching me, waiting for me to slip up. Around exactly 1:15 a.m., the whistling came again, but this time it wasn't outside. It echoed through the vents inside the house, cold and unnatural, like breath on the back of my neck. I followed the sound cautiously down to the basement door, heart pounding so loud it felt like it might burst. When I reached for the doorknob, something icy brushed my hand, like a cold breath. The whistling stopped suddenly. I froze, listening to silence so heavy it pressed against my skin. Then, barely a whisper floated through the dark. "You're not welcome." I stumbled back, slammed the door, and bolted it tight. This wasn't a prank. It was something old and dangerous, and it wanted me gone. After days of tension, I decided to set up some old security cameras around the property. I wasn't sure if I'd catch anything, but I needed some proof, something to explain what was happening. I positioned them near the back door, the shed, and the tree line where the whistling seemed to come from. That night, I barely slept, watching the feeds on my phone, waiting for the familiar sound. At exactly 1:15 a.m., the whistling started again, slow, broken, off-key. Then I saw it, a shadowy figure slipping between the trees, moving silently, almost like it was stalking me. It paused, tilted its head as if listening, then vanished into the darkness. I froze, heart pounding, realizing I wasn't imagining any of this. Someone, or something, was out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to come closer. The next morning, I scoured the camera footage. Frame by frame, I studied that shadow, tall, thin, limbs too long to be human. It didn't walk, it glided like it didn't quite belong in this world. Its head turned in a sharp, mechanical motion toward the camera before it disappeared behind the shed. I rushed outside, half expecting to find tracks, but the frost was untouched. Nothing disturbed. I even checked the shed, locked, untouched. But something had been there. I left the cameras rolling the next night, this time placing one inside the house, pointing at the living room window. At 1:15 a.m., the whistling returned, but this time it was closer, louder. When I reviewed the feed the next morning, my blood went cold. The thing didn't stop at the tree line. It stood right outside the window, staring in, and I was asleep on the couch, just a few feet away. I didn't sleep the next night. I sat in the dark with every light off, clutching a flashlight in one hand and a hammer in the other, heart pounding at every creak. At exactly 1:15 a.m., the whistling came again. But this time, it wasn't outside. It was in the house, slow, tuneless, moving from the hallway toward the living room. I didn't breathe. I aimed the flashlight and turned it on. Nothing. No one. Just the sound, getting louder, coming from every direction. Then it stopped. For a long second, the silence felt worse than the noise. And then, from just behind me, a voice whispered, "Don't look." I spun around. Nothing there. But the camera, the one pointed at me from the corner, showed it. Frame by frame, it stepped out from behind the couch, watched me freeze, then leaned close to the lens, smiling. I don't remember the rest. I just know I left that night. I never went back, and the whistling never left me. I'd been driving west all afternoon, trying to avoid the interstate and enjoy a quieter route through the countryside. The farmland rolled endlessly on both sides, flat, golden fields broken by the occasional silo or decrepit barn. My GPS had died hours ago, and I hadn't seen a single sign of life since turning off the main road. Not even a passing car. I told myself I liked the isolation, that it was part of the adventure, but the silence was starting to feel too complete, almost staged. As dusk crept in, my fuel gauge slipped closer to empty, and my phone had no signal. I began scanning the horizon for any sign of people. Just as the road curved between two massive cornfields, I spotted a rusted mailbox and a narrow dirt driveway disappearing into the rows. At the far end sat an old farmhouse with a leaning porch and a single light on upstairs. I pulled over, engine idling, and debated if I should walk up and ask for help. I stepped out of the car and was hit by how silent it all was. No birdsong, no insects, not even wind, just that thick, suffocating quiet that presses in on your ears. The corn on either side of the gravel driveway stood unusually tall for this time of year, rows so dense they seemed to absorb sound. As I walked toward the farmhouse, each step crunched loud beneath my boots, echoing in the stillness. The house looked even more weathered up close, paint peeling, porch sagging, and a crooked rocking chair swaying slightly even though the air was completely still. That upstairs light hadn't flickered once, but the rest of the windows were dark, giving the place a hollow feel. I hesitated at the bottom step, unsure if I should turn back, but curiosity and desperation won. I knocked. No response. Then a soft creak echoed from inside. A few seconds later, the porch light clicked on by itself, and the front door creaked open just an inch. I waited, expecting someone to call out or come to the door, but no one did. The gap in the doorway remained just wide enough to show total darkness inside. I leaned forward and said, "Hello," my voice sounding too loud in the thick air. Still nothing. I pushed the door open a little more, and it let out a long groan as it swung inward. The smell hit me immediately, a damp, earthy rot like wet wood and something faintly metallic underneath. "Anyone home?" I asked again, stepping inside cautiously. The floorboards flexed under my weight. The hallway ahead was narrow and lined with faded wallpaper curling at the edges. Dust hung in the air like it had been disturbed recently. On a small table by the door sat a bowl of keys and a half-drunk glass of water. That's when I heard it. Soft footsteps above me. Not hurried, not heavy. Just a slow, deliberate pace moving across the upstairs floor, then stopping directly overhead. I froze beneath the creaking ceiling, straining to hear more. Whoever was upstairs wasn't moving anymore, but I could feel their presence, like they were listening just as intently as I was. I backed toward the front door, but it had quietly shut behind me. I turned the knob. Locked. I didn't remember locking it. My pulse picked up. I didn't want to shout or panic yet, not without understanding what this was. Maybe someone lived here who wasn't all there. Maybe they mistook me for a threat. "Sorry to bother you," I called out. "I'm just passing through. My GPS died." No answer. Then slowly a shadow moved at the top of the stairs, just a shape, tall and still, half visible in the gloom. My voice caught in my throat. The figure didn't descend or retreat. It only raised one hand, slow and deliberate, and pointed down at me. Not in greeting, not in warning, just a long, bony finger extended in eerie, silent accusation. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't seem to move. The figure didn't speak or blink, just stood there pointing, like it had all the time in the world. I backed away until my heel hit the edge of a worn rug in the hallway. That small contact snapped something in me. I turned and bolted for what looked like the kitchen, hoping there was a back door. The moment I crossed the threshold, I skidded to a stop. The kitchen looked wrong, like someone had tried to make it appear normal, but had never actually lived in it. The fridge hummed, but it was unplugged. The clock on the wall ticked, but the hands were missing. And on the table sat a Polaroid photo, freshly developed, still curling at the corners. I picked it up with a shaking hand. It was a picture of me, standing outside the house, looking toward the cornfield, taken from above, from that second-floor window. My stomach dropped. Someone had been watching long before I knocked. My hands trembled as I set the photo down. I scanned the room for weapons, anything. A rusted steak knife lay beside the sink, but the blade was snapped in half. I grabbed it anyway, gripping the dull end as I crept toward a narrow hallway off the kitchen. I was sure there had to be a back door, but the hallway ended in a boarded-up wall. No windows, no exits, just more peeling wallpaper and a single framed photo of a different man standing in this same kitchen, looking terrified. I turned back quickly, but stopped dead. The front hallway was no longer empty. The figure had come downstairs. I could see part of their shoulder now, just peeking around the corner, unmoving. I ducked into the pantry, heart hammering, and closed the door as quietly as I could. There was barely enough room to crouch. I held my breath in the thick, dusty dark. Then, through the slats, I saw a second figure silently emerge from the staircase. This one smaller, crawling along the floor. I covered my mouth, barely able to keep from making a sound. The smaller figure moved unnaturally, knees and elbows scraping the floor with slow, deliberate movements, like it didn't care about being heard. It stopped in the kitchen, just feet from the pantry door, head tilted as if sniffing the air. My lungs burned. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then suddenly the thing let out a low clicking noise, sharp, wet, mechanical, and began tapping its fingers against the floor in a pattern. Tap, tap, pause, tap. From the hallway, the taller figure responded with a soft knock against the wall. They were communicating. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Then the knob to the pantry twitched, once, twice. I pressed my weight against the door, praying the latch would hold. Just as it began to creak open, a loud crash erupted upstairs, like furniture being thrown. Both figures froze. The tapping stopped. Without a word, they turned and began moving back toward the staircase. I stayed crouched in the pantry, counting my breaths, every nerve on edge. The silence felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. After a long, unbearable minute, I risked a glance. The hallway was empty again. The only sound was the faint creak of the rocking chair slowly turning on the porch outside. I didn't dare move until I heard a car pull onto the driveway. A real car, not mine. I rushed to the front door, yanking it open just as a beat-up pickup truck rolled in. A man climbed out, his face weathered and rough, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his eyes. He looked at me like I was an apparition. "You shouldn't be here," he said low, voice rough like gravel. "This place, it doesn't take kindly to strangers." I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry and raw, like sandpaper scratching inside. My GPS died. I just wanted directions or maybe a place to fill up gas," I managed to say, my voice shaky. The man's eyes narrowed beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, sizing me up like I was an intruder. "This land's been cursed for years," he said finally, voice low and gravelly. "Folks come and go, but some never leave, not by choice." His words sank in like a stone, and I glanced back at the dark house behind me. A cold shiver ran down my spine as the wind picked up, rattling the pickup's metal frame and stirring the cornfields like ghostly hands reaching out. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Whatever was out here wasn't just waiting. It was hunting, always waiting for the next fool to wander too close. I didn't wait for him to say more. I turned and sprinted back to my car, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The rustling cornfield seemed alive, shadows twisting just beyond my sight. I slammed the door, started the engine, and peeled out onto the gravel, the farmhouse shrinking behind me into the dark. As I drove away, the headlights caught something moving in the field, tall, thin, and unmoving. I didn't look back again until I was safely on the highway, the comforting glow of streetlights replacing the suffocating black. That night, in the safety of a motel far from that cursed farm, I swore I'd never take the back roads again. Some places don't want visitors. Some threats aren't just human. They're waiting in the silence, ready to claim the next lost traveler.